talk about, how does Citrix relate to Teams, and, how might those two things work together? Dave is talking about central deployment where, with, the Office 365 platform, we've got some deployment options. So if someone didn't want to do Citrix, what would be, some methods of deploying across an enterprise environment? And then let's go back and compare that to how Citrix might do that.
Okay, so if you're trying to push Teams throughout an entire organization, assuming that there's a server involved in the organization and you're on a domain, you would push it through group policy to every member, just through basically an executable or MSI file, which is very similar to how Citrix would do it. The difference is that Citrix, by nature, eliminates the ability for people to make mistakes in a lot of cases. And Dave will attest to the fact that when you're talking about a virtual machine, you're not really working on your computer or whatever device that you're working on. You're actually working on like kind of an image of a PC sitting on top of it. So by nature, Dave has the ability to control everything that I'm doing as the administrator for Citrix. So he has the ability to keep me from downloading new apps if he doesn't want me to. He has the ability to change some things in the way that we interact, whether it's interacting with the workstation that you're on, or maybe it's interacting with the actual virtual machine that Citrix is applying to that practice. So I'm going to let Dave talk a little bit more about like the actual integration with Teams. But I mean, that's from my perspective. I think it's fantastic the way that you can deploy it through Citrix or through a regular development. But if you're talking about workstations, like a small business, that integration is much more difficult because you're actually having to go and do the manual process on every single machine, just like Dave was talking about in the old days where you're taking a floppy disk around. Well, the reality is that someone has to log on to each machine or get on to each machine and download that application, right? So you could literally put it on a USB and walk around to every machine in your office, but if you have 1,000, that's a pretty cumbersome task, right?
Yeah,
but,
can you get less expensive computers if you're running Citrix because you don't need as many resources to run those applications? You essentially bulk the resources up on the server, and maybe you're running Photoshop on the server versus running Photoshop on your local PC, right? So maybe you can bring your overall cost down, which is going to offset some of the potential cost of Citrix. And then the other thing that comes to my mind is, if you've got a direct connection between the PC and the Citrix server, if you have a laptop that's stolen or something of that nature, all you got to do is cut the connection because there's nothing else on the PC that they could access. So you would have a very instant and easy way to secure something in the event of theft. The other thing that comes up now is viruses, right? And ransomware.
Absolutely.
Some things like that. So, somebody clicks on something on their PC and they introduce ransomware into your environment. Well, in the Citrix environment, Dave, I'm guessing that there's centralized controls that kind of prevent all that from happening.
Absolutely. You sound like you've been using Citrix for years, actually, Aaron. Because you're hitting on a lot of the main points. There's actually now, to even take the ransomware even one step further, and you're absolutely right, there is even a service now that Citrix offers called Secure Browser. We all forget, everybody thinks of their email, clicking on links in email, but the browser is still the #1 application that's compromised. Now, even in certain industries, in the government, they're really tying that down. Up until this point, the most common thing was good virus protection, and then whitelisting or blacklisting websites. That has actually failed recently in some of the most common attacks. So they even offer a service that allows you to run a browser in the cloud. You get to use it. You get to have your browser as a user, and it's just so locked down that it protects you against those attacks. But the things that you hit on, if a laptop is stolen, absolutely. Less power. Actually, now Citrix was actually the leader in At the first go around was BYOC, bring your own computer, that quickly morphed into what we call today BYOD, bring your own device. So that really one of the things is I don't need, if a user or an employee of mine wants to use their home computer, I don't really need to control that computer that much anymore. I don't need to lock it down and be worried about it. I can just give them access, and I control all that access on the back end. Everything stays in the server room, in the building, we used to call it. And as you mentioned earlier on, there's many ways to lock down the clipboard. You can't copy and paste. You can actually watermark the video today, so they can't do that. And then also key logging. You can actually, there's protection against key logging. You can, there's a nice demo out there on YouTube, shows that the key loggers log in your home computer, but it does not go through the Citrix session. So it actually has technology, even protects you from key logging today. And then you even hit on the performance. Absolutely, that was a theory of thin terms, and that's why even today you can use, an iPad, and you can run your Excel computations or whatever on the back end server or whatever you're doing there. Absolutely.
So in most hosted environments today too, adding resources to the server environment is, done with a couple clicks in the cloud. So if people are complaining, hey, things aren't going so well or things are slow, you just log into your portal and use, all right, I want to add more RAM, and boom, there you go.
Well, I mean, there's actually a few different ways of doing it, and you can do it on your premise. You can do the hybrid cloud and have it set up like that, or you can actually just have elasticity just set up in the cloud and it's automated.
Right.
A big scenario that people talk about, and it's a true scenario. You do a large corporation or just a good sized company, car dealerships. This is a big thing they hit on. They do a big ad, and how much web traffic are you going to get when that ad hits on Sunday? How many servers do I need to buy? I don't want to overspend. I don't want to underspend. And yet that ad is really going to give you a spike for about a week, let's say, as an example. So you buy 100 servers and you find out the spike is I needed 200 servers, and then the spike is over after a week. So now you have 100 servers sitting in the back room, which were not enough power. Now they're collecting dust, and then what do you do? There's many different scenarios for companies like that, but absolutely leveraging. If you want to go full cloud, fully in the cloud today, there's many different ways to just really automate the way that your servers actually scale up and scale down. Again, Citrix and all the vendors, and I missed IBM before, fully native applications, which allows servers and workstations to be shut down. That's the way that you can actually save a lot of your hours in the cloud, and that's actually a big differentiator of Citrix product line too.
So let's talk about Citrix and Teams and how those two can work together and why someone would want to consider going that direction.
I mean, the thing that comes to mind, Josh hit it on a little bit, but really centralized administration. I as an administrator control what update is on the workstations. I'm at version 4.1, let's say, and 4.2 comes out, and I don't want 4.2 to go out in my organization. My security team has not validated it yet. I control that as an administrator versus users just being able to update their individual workstations. That's a big one. Offloading some of the power, centralizing it, you can with webcams and things of that nature, offload some of that to the workstation, but you can also offload that to the back-end server. And again, a big part of it is being able to add that level of security and lock it down so that nobody could really copy and paste or think about ways that they could not get any of that data truly out of the system into their local system. You really can control that data and make sure that data stays in your system.
Can you disable screenshots?
Yes, you can. Well, what you can do is you can watermark everything. because people could still sit there and take a picture with the camera, correct?
Right.
You know, and when you think
Nothing
about
you can
that.
do about that.
But what you can do is watermark it. So if they're taking pictures, you know who's logged in, what time they're logged in. So there's a watermark across the whole desktop when you're viewing it.
Okay. So what would be the reasons why somebody wouldn't want to utilize Teams with Citrix? You know, the first thing that comes to my mind is you've got a single point of failure, right? What kind of backup and redundancy is going to be necessary on the back end to make sure that you don't have a problem with one piece of hardware or, you know, choke point, and then all of a sudden your organization isn't working?
Well, there's a lot of resiliency when a Citrix system is designed correctly. In the cloud, obviously, if you go with a Citrix service, lots of redundancy there, so it's not really a single point of failure. And then even if you were going to design it on-prem in your data center, you actually I mean, you really use multiple servers. I mean, you really design around a single point of failure. I mean, it is a single system, but it's multiple servers acting as that single system, and you build redundancy into the system.
So let's talk about SMBs, because that's you know, who most of our customers are. And as a SMB, I'm thinking that the Citrix service makes more sense to me, because I don't want to have to invest in servers or even rent servers in a colo.
Yep.
I want to rely on the experience and the redundancy and resiliency of the Citrix environment to take care of all those things for me. I just don't want to have to worry about, you know, if something fails. You know, I know Citrix is going to reroute me to another data center of theirs in a different part of the country, and all of that headache is just going to disappear. I'm going to probably going to pay a little bit more for it, but overall, it's just not going to affect my business, and I probably won't even notice it for the most part.
Correct. Exactly. I mean, that's to the point of, even at your office, you're really getting everything out of that building, because everything's outbound. Some people don't understand that, but you really protect about things coming in to your office. And if you really have nothing in your office in that building, a lot of those pieces of equipment that might be there, firewall, an extra firewall and stuff, you don't even have to be managing that anymore. You can get rid of those pieces of equipment and really just have your Comcast or whatever cable in the office, or of course in today's world, a lot of people are at home, and you allow Citrix to manage everything in their environment. Correct.
I know in our office, we have kind of a legacy server room that has its own air conditioning unit, and paying for that square footage and the extra utility on that. I mean, we're in Florida, so that AC is running 24/7, 365, and we're just running up costs to, you know, to have some bulk storage in there because we have it left over from years ago. So, you know, we throw photos on it. Whereas that, you know, we could downsize the office square footage, and that's a savings that you'd realize almost forever in that way. But Josh, with Teams, I know, you know, traditionally we've been able to deploy Teams, manage Teams, control user access and things like that, you know, through the Microsoft Office portal, right? And they've developed a nice portal where you can see a lot, and that portal's really kind of come a long ways in you know, what you can control. Tell us a little bit about the administration of that if somebody's not on Citrix, and what might be some of the pros and cons of a more traditional implementation.
So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is, it doesn't matter at really whether you're on Citrix or whether you're deploying it individually or from a server, because at the end of the day, the centralized management of that application is done via Office 365 in the cloud, right? So you have an admin center in the cloud, you're going to deploy it. The difference is through Citrix that nobody else has the ability to go in and make changes other than that administrator, because they're, like Dave said, everything is outbound. So everything you're doing on that environment is really happening on the server. It's not happening on the physical machine because it's almost like a remote session into that server, right? So at the end of the day, there are a ton of policies that you can put in that will limit, like for instance, like this meeting, when you actually started the meeting, we can limit whether or not, because you are the organizer, Dave and I would have to sit in the lobby and wait until you came in order to start the meeting, right? Which is important, especially if you want to make sure that you're going to record everything that's happening and all the interactions that are taking place as well. You can limit the ability to share screens. Okay, so maybe we don't want to have everybody on the call able to do that. We can also manage whether or not people can mute themselves, or you're going to automatically do that for them. So you just take all the you can really take the controls and centralize them to the administrator of a call or some sort of meeting like this, and that is a huge benefit. One of the other things that I didn't get that I didn't really hit on, and something that is a huge benefit, is when you're structuring a Teams meeting, even if you don't have Teams, where Zoom and any of the other GoToMeetings, any of that stuff, there's an application that you are forced to download onto your PC, right? With Teams, when you send a meeting invite via Outlook or Exchange, you can click on it and you can choose whether or not to just go to a web version, okay? And one of the best benefits of Citrix, and where Dave was talking about a secure browser, is now we're in that secure environment. We're not just exposing ourselves to the World Wide Web and all the bad people that are on it, right? So, but yes, you can really lock down whether it's meeting policies, whether it's the way that people interact with Teams. You can set up locations where people can't actually access if they're not in a specific location, and you can actually hone that down to individual computers based on a MAC address or an IP address. Also, from location perspectives, you can actually lock it down to the individual device and determine what kind of device we're going to be able to use. And that way you don't have people just kind of going willy-nilly and just putting it on whatever, right? That maybe aren't in a secure environment. So you can really kind of lock all of those permissions down for sure with Teams. And then you've got the reporting also.